mystery theory. I am going to do part 1 of the Kendrick Johnson case, and I was going to do it soft spoken, but I've been fighting this cold since Friday, and I lose my voice every other word when I'm trying to do soft spoken. So, there you go. We're doing a whisper because why not? My lymph nodes are going crazy. My asthma is acting like crazy. And so if I am a little bit more breathy, it's not on purpose, guys. It's just that I'm trying to breathe or survive, for that matter. Now, the Kendrick Johnson case was something that I skipped a couple of times because when I did the research, my research is not the popular kind of research or the popular kind of theory in this case. So I was afraid that I was going to get a lot of negativity, but you know what? This is the research that I've done. It is from reputable places. It's not something that I read on a Reddit thread. And I'm going to give you the information, and you can make up your own mind. I'm not here trying to change your mind if you have it already made up in this case, okay? We are okay. We can agree to disagree, and I will always respect your opinion at the end when I cover part 2 of this case. I wanted to get that out of the way because my intention with this is always to share a story of somebody that deserves to be known. And, you know, the stories that we all need to keep in mind. A lot of things are going on here in America right now. And I also want to say before I start this video that I am standing from a neutral view point, and I'm going to explain where we are from, my husband and I. It was a country made out of immigrants, so there's a lot of white people that left Europe after World War II or during, and there's a lot of black and mixed white and black people, and we never were told that there's a difference in skin tone. That is something that I'm very proud of. I never grew up in a, or I never knew that racism was something that was still a thing growing up. I thought that after slavery and everything, it was just basically abolished for good, and people forgot about the difference between skin colors, and that's what I thought in my little 3 million people country. So I was never told there was a difference between the difference. It's you're either a good person, not a good person, a good friend, not a good friend. But if you're black or white or mixed like I am, it really doesn't matter. My roots are Portuguese and Italian, and so I am not white and I'm not black. I'm just like kind of a tannish skin tone, and nobody told me that I was different from what is considered normal in today's world. My husband the same no matter what color we are, and I'm glad that that was one good thing that it came out of where I'm from. We have a bunch of other problems, but racism is not one of them. I guess it's just because we are a country made out of immigrants, so we're all kind of different colors and sizes, and nobody cares. I mean, I promise, nobody cares. Now, 6 minutes into this video, I am going to start part 1 of Kendrick Johnson that will include how his body was found, what happened, and I'm going to share some gruesome details, but I'll give you a warning if you want to skip over that part, okay? The gruesome details are going to help us with one of the theories, so if you want to understand this a little bit better, I wouldn't skip it, but you're more than welcome to skip that part or this video altogether. Now, this story started with the kind of moment that we all as moms, if you're a mom, you know what I mean, have or at some point had, that our kids say, you know, I'll stay after school and then I'll meet some friends and then we're gonna go out to eat and then, and you're like, okay, you get off at 2. When are you coming home? If you're a mom, I mean, you've probably been there. You know your babies are growing up and they need to spend their time with friends and, you know, their peers and doing activities that do not necessarily requires a parent around, but you have a timeline, you know, they get up at this time and then they make it back home by this time, and you give them a little wiggle, maybe time for error kind of thing, or allowance, but you know what happens when that time is up and they're not home. If the last time you spoke to them was in the morning and you knew that they were going to be late, you know, but what happens when they don't show up, when they tell you, you know, I'm gonna do all these things and I'll be home by 9 o'clock, and then they never show up? Of course, you immediately question if anything happened earlier, and maybe you just missed it. I know I can't go to bed until my babies, my older babies are 17 and 19, are home even on a Friday or Saturday night. I know exactly where they are. I know that they're playing soccer. I know at the time that they're gonna come back. I know all those things. Yet, I mean, I can't. I need to wait for them to make it home before I feel okay to go to bed. You know, it's the kind of thing that it's normal in life, but nobody said that it was going to be easy, okay? So, and I get it. I mean, I know that they need time to change after they play, and then they need to chat with their buddies about the game, and maybe complain about the ref, and so on and so forth. And then by the time they get to the car, you know, they spend quite a bit of time, but, you know, they better text me and let me know, hey, Mom, we're on our way home, because I don't care if they're 80 years old. I mean, they hold a piece of my heart until I get home. It's like my heart is in pieces. So the beginning of this story it was like a nightmare for any mother, because Kendrick's mom had to go through this on January 10th of 2013, when about, you know, she started to worry about 9:30. So I can totally understand how she probably felt at this time when, you know, she realized that Kendrick wasn't home, and he was supposed to be home, but he wasn't. Kendrick told his mother that he was going to stay after school to watch a basketball game, and I know my kids do that all the time, but, you know, later on we will learn that when she started to call Kendrick's friends and everything, he didn't even make it to the game. So she kind of knew her way around the schools and where kids would hang out, and so she decides to go to the school at around 11 p.m. after I mean, 9:30 she started to work, so I can't even think how she felt at 11 p.m. when she decided to go. And hopefully she could find her son there, hanging out with some friends, maybe, they were having a good time, then he forgot to go home, those kind of things that you're trying to make sense of while you are trying to keep calm, I'm guessing. But we know that deep inside she was scared because she knew that he wouldn't do that. She knew that he would call. She knew that he wouldn't let her go through all this horrible moments just because he forgot to call in. At 12:30 a.m., she calls the police and reports him missing, but the 911 dispatcher tells her that it's very common for kids of his age to lose track of time, and that he's probably chasing girls. That is what the 911 dispatcher said. The mom tells her that it's impossible, that Kendrick would have called her, or even, his sister or his brother, that he knew that they would be worried and that he always called that something was wrong. So the mom insisted, and the report was made at 4 a.m. They called her. Okay, so she called at 12:30, but at 4 a.m. they called her. And they told her that they are looking for Kendrick, okay? Now, at this point, Kendrick's dad, his name is Kenneth, he is a truck driver, and he is in Pennsylvania at the time, so he couldn't really help with the search at this point. And Jackie, Kendrick's mom, decided to go to her mom's house and, kind of pray and get a little bit of comfort from somebody since Kenneth wasn't home. The next morning at 8:30 a.m., Jackie decided to go to the high school, her son's high school, and see if they knew anything about her son. She went into the office and they took her to a counselor's office where she waited for a very long time. At that point, she gets a message while she's waiting that outside the school there is a fire truck and an ambulance, and that they were in lockdown. In the meantime, the counselor receives a call, and the person on the other side was frantic and loud, so Jackie could hear what the other person was saying very clearly. They found a body in the gym. At that point, the counselor left the office. Now, why would this worry her? Well, Kendrick was an athlete, and he was going to watch the game the night before, remember? He's also missing. But he was at the gym all the time. He was a sophomore, he was a basketball player, a football player. He also did track, and he was in the gym all the time. So, of course, this worried Jackie at that point. But, let me tell you a little bit about the gym and specifically where this body was found. Now, the high school was in Valdosta, Georgia, and this is a town of 54,000 people. There were two different high schools back in 2013 in the area, and they just came back from the Christmas break, okay, because you know that they have a very long break for Christmas. And by the way, I never understood the basketball season during the break, but games go on even during the break. Sometimes, the day after Christmas is a little bit crazy, but they had two different gyms. One was the old one, and then the new one that they built recently. So now you know that there are two different gyms, which is something that a lot of people get confused over. Now let's go back to the morning on how the body was found, okay? So let's leave mom at the counselor's office and go over what actually happened in what led to find that body. At around, okay, they were having some kind of live sports class in the old gym, and the teacher gave a paper with a survey to the students to complete. And you know how those things go. I mean, one of the girls finished it pretty quickly, and she started walking around. She actually quickly jumped from the bleachers to a set of rolled up mats. There were 21 of them, and they were standing upright. They are used by this kind of mats, so you have an idea on your head. They're not the really tiny ones. These ones are very heavy, and they are the ones that are being used by the athletic department. Some say the wrestling team, others say cheerleaders. I am just assuming that these are the kind of mats that they put in the bottom so kids don't get hurt while they are doing all those things. Now this girl, she looked down a hole of one of those mats and down the center of, the how it was rolled up vertically, and she saw 2 feet inside. She, of course, at first thought that somebody was hiding, so she called some of her friends to take a look, and they see white socks still on the feet of somebody's body. Again, at first they were kind of thinking that somebody was hiding there, but then they realized that that person wasn't moving, and they started screaming in horror. The teacher runs to them and starts to pull the mats down to the side so he could get to the mat the students were looking at. When he moved, that one fell to the floor with a loud thud, and from the end of the mat that was touching the floor, the body of a student with dreadlocks comes out with blood and vomit. It was a horrible sight, and this student was clearly dead. Another teacher made it there by that time and started to take the students out. They called 911, and at that point, the school was placed in lockdown. That is at the time that the mom was at the counselor's office. So that is how everything started. Now, just so you know, Kendrick Johnson was born on October 10th, 1995. For me, dates are very important. That's why I wanted to share it. His mom is Jackie and Kenneth Johnson. His nickname was KJ, and he was described as a very quiet boy. Unlikely, and I'm quoting somebody, unlikely to cause trouble. He was known for loving football, for wanting to become a football player in the future, but he also loved math. Now, by the time that this happened, he was 5'10", and he weighed 160 pounds. Now, a lot of people speculate that his home life was a little bit troubled, that his father was living with a girlfriend at the time, and that the mom was too busy or not involved in his life as she should be. That Kendrick spent a lot of time with his friends at his friends' houses, and sometime he would spend the night or come out really late. But I mean, isn't that a typical thing for a teenager to do? Now, I don't know if all those things are accurate, but a lot of people like to give this little bit of background, which honestly, after doing all the research, I don't think it's that relevant. I mean, it's relevant because we need to know about it, but it's not relevant to the investigation, you know what I mean? A lot of people use this information to put the case in a different category, which I don't think it's really where it should be. But let's go back to the day that the body was found. After the police arrived there, they said that there was no threat to the students, so classes proceeded What? Yes, class had proceeded while they continued to investigate. I'm assuming that it's maybe to start asking some questions, but honestly, I found that very. I don't know if I would want my kids to be in a school where there's going to be an investigation of a kid that just showed up dead. But I'm assuming that maybe they thought it was an accident from the beginning, and they realized that really it was no threat. But out of respect, I would have sent the kids home. The sheriff at that point confirms that the body was of a student, and he does that to the media. And they spent 2 days investigating not only the sheriff's department but the GBI with it, which is the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. It is also determined that the body was identified by EMT, and I'm assuming that it wasn't the EMT, but it was maybe a student or maybe the teacher that saw it, that it was Kendrick Johnson, and that he was deceased. Now, they didn't tell that to the media just yet, but they can tell as far as preliminary or in the beginning parts of the investigations that there's no signs of forced entry in the windows or even the doors or the gym. They found a couple of things or a few things around. They found a black and white Adidas shoe in a 9.5 size. They just found one. They found a yellow folder, a science textbook, a medium size sweatshirt, and the body of Kendrick. They also see some blood stains in the wall of the gym and a pair of Nike shoes as well. This is pretty much everything that was listed in the initial report. At 4 p.m., the coroner arrived at the scene after the initial investigation. According to the law, you should know that he should have been called as soon as the body was reported to the police. According to the sheriff's office, this is something they do all the time. So we break the law all the time. Not big deal. But the law says that you should call the coroner's office immediately, and he's like, well, this is procedure. Okay. But it's not what the law requires. However, this was a very controversial topic in the investigation, and you'll know why as we go through. The coroner said that because they call him hours later, that the scene, in his opinion, was compromised, but he didn't explain why. So they didn't follow protocol. The shoes were uncovered, and I'm talking about the investigators, and details that really don't make a whole lot of sense, but I'm assuming that they didn't because they assumed immediately that this was an accident. However, I don't think that's a very good excuse for not following the law or protocol in this case. Once the coroner arrived, the body was still partially inside the mat from the abdomen down, laying on his left side, and the head in. And again, this is where the gruesome details that are really important are going to start. They found him laying down on his left side and the head in a pool of blood. Kendrick was wearing a white undershirt, orange t-shirt, and white t-shirt with blue jeans, boxers, and white socks. There was a pair of white, gray, and orange Nikes inside the mat, but not on Kendrick's feet. But, they were on the wrong side of the mat. They were not in the bottom like he was trying to reach to grab that shoe. They were where his feet were. His right arm was covering his face, or that's what it seemed like it. And his left arm was along his body with the forearm bent towards his head. His His face was swollen and he had blood coming out of his eyes, nose, and mouth. Dry blood was visible in his arms, legs, and face. His eyes were swollen and bloody, but there were no signs of blunt force trauma or any puncture wounds. They also found the other black and white Adidas shoe located on the concrete floor near Kendrick's head, sitting in a pool of blood. So this shoe matched the other one that they found earlier. They also found an LG phone in one of his jeans pocket. The mat where Kendrick was found was 74 inches long. This is very important, so a little over 6 feet tall. 34 inches in diameter, but it was rolled up, and the opening itself, once it was rolled up, it was a 14 inches in the opening where the feet were, and 14 3/4 of an inch where his head was. I know there's so many details here, but they're gonna start to not make sense as far as forensic evidence, okay? They also found bloody paper towels in a trash can in the girls' restroom located near the old gym. In the initial EMT reports, and this is something that, because of this, there's a lot of controversy, it was noted that there was some bruising on the right side jaw, but the body was taken in for an autopsy. That just was something that was noted, but it will be important later on. Now, the sheriff released a statement saying that they didn't find any foul play, but that they were going to conduct an autopsy on Monday to determine the cause of death. To the sheriff department, at that point, it seemed like an accident, but they didn't release the name in that press release. On January 11th, at some point, the police informed Jackie that Kendrick has been found deceased, and the father at that point requested to identify the body, and both parents were taken to the cooler room at the lab and identified Kendrick. Later on, he said he looked nothing like his handsome son. That is something that, not only has to do in the way that he died, but we need to understand that the body is changing as time passes on. But the trauma was so, what Kendrick went through and how he died, it was so, I don't know. I don't even know how to describe it, but because of the way he died, the position and everything, it made the body look even worse. So I completely understand when the father said that he looked nothing like his son. On Monday, January 14th, Kendrick's body was taken to the GBI for their autopsy. The initial one indicated no foul play, no visible injuries to the body, but GBI wanted to still do their own autopsy. Now, this is what they found and what they believe happened. Apparently, Kendrick got inside the mat by himself, but found it impossible to get out. They are not sure at this point if he fell or reached inside the mat to get a shoe and got stuck. But Kendrick's father stated that he couldn't believe that his very strong son couldn't get out of that mat if in fact this was an accident. The official cause of death, positional asphyxia, suffocation due to the position of the body. Because of the way that he fell, autopsies, it was an accident. I mean, they had to continue this investigation, of course, so they compiled the lab results, the physical evidence, the testimony of friends, classmates, and people that worked in that high school, the staff itself, and they had to put all that together to come up with a theory. And this is what they think that actually happened that day, based on all the evidence that I just mentioned. Kendrick was last seen in surveillance camera footage getting in the old gym at 1:09 p.m. On January 10th, 2013. He got in behind another student, but he turned right in the direction of the mats. No one else was there. 15 minutes later, in that same footage, you see students that are entering the gym for class and playing basketball. After that, different kids and teams had practice in that same gym, but nobody noticed anything unusual, and there is no evidence of Kendrick leaving the gym. Kendrick was also known for not having a locker, and this is according to the staff and his friends. He didn't have a locker for his gym stuff, so he, like other students, didn't want to pay for it, so they hid their shoes and stuff inside the mats that were in the old gym. They would put their stuff inside there and reach inside the mats when they needed to use their gear for class. It was confirmed that Kendrick did that all the time, and he even shared some shoes that he would hide there with another student, so whenever they needed, they would go use the shoes and put them back inside the mat. Now, the mats were laying on the side, usually horizontally, so you have an idea. They were never vertically. And when you store them horizontally, you have more room to stick things inside the mat. So they would put a lot of things inside there. That's where they kept them safe, so they could use them when they needed it without having to pay for a locker. But during the Christmas break, the people at the school, I'm sure they were cleaning or something, so they placed them vertically and tucked away in a corner. So investigators believe that Kendrick got in the gym to change his shoes for class, didn't find the mats in the same position, so he climbed on top of the bleachers and kind of went over the mats to look for his sneakers. When he found them, one of them was probably in the bottom of the mat because of how, they used to be horizontally and now they're vertically. They're not going to check and see, are there shoes inside this or whatever. So if they didn't fall when they moved them, the shoes could have been stuck at the bottom of the mat. No. The police also noted that there were other kids there. They had been there before Kendrick because they found a lot of candy wrappers and soda bottles among the mats. So Kendrick probably climbed through the bleachers to get to the top of the mats and reach in to grab his shoes. He probably had one arm inside the mat to reach and the other one outside to get the balance and kind of stay out of the mat. But investigators assume that then he got stuck and tried to pull himself out, but got further and further down into the mat. He probably tried to reach his cell phone that his parents didn't even know that he had. But this was a cell phone that apparently the cousin had, and he was using it only as an MP3 player to play music and also to text. But he couldn't reach, so he asphyxiated pretty quickly. 700 pounds each. And the one that he was reaching was way in the back, so he couldn't move it enough to make it fall to the side. It was so heavy that he couldn't have done it even if he tried to. The one that his shoes were at was way tucked in the corner and behind all those, so he would have had to not only move 700 pounds of the mat itself, but also the other mats that were kind of pushing that one into the corner. It was a tight place, heavy mat. He was alone in the far back. Nobody could hear him, even if he was yelling. So he probably died before the next batch of kids got inside the gym 15 minutes later. I'm going through what the investigators are believing happened. The folder and the science book found were both Kendrick's, and he probably put them on the top of the mat as he was climbing up, and later on they fell down when the mats were moved by the teacher when his body was found, along with the other sneaker. They're not sure if Kendrick was able to take one of the sneakers out and not the other one. Now the paper towels. The explanation that they gave for the paper towels that were bloody in the girls' bathroom is that they were actually tissue, not paper towels, and that the blood was from a girl who got injured during practice and not Kendrick's. When they tested the dry blood spatters that they saw on the wall, they also knew that they weren't Kendrick's either, and they probably were old, that nobody cared to clean. They looked like brown marks. For the police, it was obvious that it was blood, but not for the regular people that maybe walked through that gym on a regular basis. The sheriff concluded that after 4 months of that investigation, that this was a tragedy, a freak accident, something that should never have happened, but that his investigation was through, and that he had no wounds. Kendrick had no wounds to indicate any kind of foul play. But what he did was have some abrasions, so his parents were not happy with his findings. There was no way in their mind that this was an accident. He was a big and strong boy. And according to his parents, they couldn't believe that he wasn't able to manage to get out of that mat. Why wouldn't he call for help? Why was the other shoe on the end and not below? Now remember, there were 2 pairs of shoes, the ones that he was wearing, the ones he was looking for, and some other students could have had more shoes over there. Did somebody else maybe drop a shoe inside the mat while Kendrick was inside and dead? During that afternoon that he disappeared, it is likely, and that's what the police believe, that they were trying to hide their stuff, so they kind of tossed it to the top of the mat and kind of ended up being on top of Kendrick, because according to the report, those shoes, the one that were on top, were not Kendrick's. When the parents saw that Kendrick's body, what it looked like, remember that I told you that they said that it didn't look like their son. It was bloody, it was bloated, and it looked nothing like, again, their son. So they believed that somebody did that. And so they posted this picture online for people to see it of their son. They began a campaign to find out what really happened to their son. They even contacted Reverend Rose of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, which is a civil rights organization that promised to help them in any way they could. The Johnsons also hired an attorney that they believe in, that this was racially motivated, and investigation would have been different. That is what the parents believed. They believed that there was also a cover-up in this investigation. So looking at that picture, I mean, people started to rally and support the family, and I mean, at one point in one of those rallies, 7 members of the Kendrick's family were arrested on April 2013 for obstruction. They had a Facebook page, they had a t-shirt with the picture that they took after their son was dead. The family started to name some names. Well, not really names, but they were starting to imply that they knew who did this to their son. And these were some quote-unquote white boys that they believed didn't like Kendrick, had a problem with Kendrick. And even though they wouldn't give names, they gave so many details about these boys that everyone in town knew who they were. And they were starting to make allegations and make their live in hell for those boys. The family also believed that the fact that the coroner was not called immediately was because they were trying to cover up evidence that these boys commit the crime. They also said that they went to identify the body. When they went to identify the body, the air in the cooler was not cold. It was actually warm or hot. And that they were trying to keep him in those conditions, hopefully to get rid of some physical evidence by speeding the decomposition process. Now also, Kendrick's clothing disappeared between the GBI and the funeral home that received the body for the burial. Now the transport company, and that is something that it's, my gosh, when I share part 2 I'll share my thoughts, but the transport company that took the body from the GBI to the funeral home did sign that they received all the personal belongings, but when the body arrived at the funeral home, they said that they only received a broken pair of headphones and not the clothes that has never been located, even though the transportation company did sign that they received them. So hey, here's the thought. Maybe the transportation company misplaced them. And maybe they should be held accountable for this, because if I receive something and I sign, I say, hey, I received these things, and then all of a sudden I do not deliver them to where they're supposed to go, they're either keeping it for themselves, or where are they? Kind of an interesting theory will come up in the next part, but the parents believe that the clothes and the shoe, the socks and everything had evidence of struggle, and that the police got rid of it because they didn't want to keep it as evidence and maybe somebody else find out that this was not really an accident. An ex-FBI agent also agreed with the company and with the family, I should say. And they just, this FBI agent said that this was a sloppy investigation. I do not argue that. They got an exhumation order and they got a second autopsy and sent the body to Florida. This was all paid by the family and supporters, so after the body was put down, they did dig it up and ordered to do a second autopsy, but this time by the family. Now, this second autopsy kind of contradicted the first one, and they said that they found blunt force trauma to the right side, consistent with an inflicted injury by somebody else, and that this should have been handled as a homicide. That's where I'm going to end today's video. goodness gracious. This is where all the theories and the different evidence will start. So I hope that you join me tomorrow when I will upload part 2 of this, and we can share the theories and a lot more information that you need to know before making up your mind of what really happened here. Thank you for tuning in today, and come back tomorrow. If you're watching this in the future, part 2 will be linked on the top of the screen.